In today's show, we're talking Detroit Pistons and their season preview. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. This is coming out, I think, Sunday afternoon in the States, and I think we're about a day away from opening up Basketball Monster. Don't hold me to that, but we are going to be opening up. Plan is on the 14th of August, so we'll see what happens. Not everything is going to be fleshed out in there. Of course, we're still waiting on things like trades to go down, but all the first run of projections have been done, and we're just waiting on a few things to open up. So Monday the 14th looks like it will be the day, and then things will adjust every single day as news comes through and articles filter in and all that sort of thing. But what we're here to talk about today is the Detroit Pistons, so we might as well start talking about the Detroit Pistons. All right, here he is, back on the show, the host of the Locked On Pistons podcast. It is Koo Cahill. Koo, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Last year, it was a lot of fun being on. I hope to have the same amount of fun this time around.
Well, look, I'm going to throw out the caveat that I threw out when talking to Sean on the Raptors podcast. Everyone knows that I hate the Detroit Pistons with every fiber of my being, and everything I say about them is rooted in bias, and there's no reality in anything I said. This is what I got called out for, Koo, because I factually stated that the Pistons were the worst team in the NBA last season. I can't really do much about that. They were, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to talk about here and a lot of things that are interesting, and there's a lot of players that I actually really like on this squad. There's just a few other things that I have quite a few questions on, but we're going to go into the Pistons here. You're going to take me as the biggest Pistons hater in the world. Well, you aren't, but people are. I know that. Let's talk about how this squad looks, and we'll start off by just having a look at what changed on the roster. So they drafted Asar Thompson, which I know that you loved at pick number 5. We'll just start there. Like, you love that pick.
Yeah, I absolutely love that pick. That's who I wanted the Pistons to get for a few weeks leading up to the draft. It was him and Jarris Walker, who I had at 5. Yeah, I was a big Asar guy. I was really happy with his drafting. I'm not too concerned about his overall fit when it comes to three-point shooting. I think he's going to fit in just fine with all the other things he addresses. But yeah, I very much love that pick.
He's awesome. I had him at 5 as well. The guy I had at 4 slipped down, which is Taylor Hendricks, which I thought would have been actually a perfect fit for the Pistons. A 4 who can protect the rim and shoot. Yeah, that would have been awesome to get a guy like that. But I've got no problem with the side. I think he's going to be an awesome player, and it is a fantastic selection. The other guys they added, Monte Morris, basically for free. Joe Harris, basically for free. Marcus Sasser, well, they had to pay a little bit there, which is a decision I didn't really 100% agree with. And they signed Malcolm Casalon as a 2-way. They don't have Corey Joseph anymore, which is a huge W, I think. Hamidou Diallo is gone. RJ Hampton's gone. Dwayne Casey legend Rodney Magruder is out of there, and Eugene Omoruyi is gone. But also, of course, Dwayne Casey is gone. And that, out of everything that's happened here, Dwayne Casey, he's not gone. He's gone from making coaching and rotation decisions. That might be, look, no offense to the bloke, great guy, fantastic guy, and I know you probably can't comment on this, but he was a bad coach. And I think getting rid of him and signing what was the richest coach contract in NBA history to Monty Williams is just a gigantic upgrade. And don't, to talk about Dwayne and all that stuff, but you can just talk about how big it is to get Monty Williams in.
Oh, getting Monty was a big deal. I think a lot of my listeners know that I was a very loud Dwayne Casey critic. Like you said, a great man, just a fantastic human being, a great role model, great for the locker room, great for to have him around in the organization still obviously helps some of the young guys who got really familiar with him, and he helped really grow into young men. So for all that stuff, he's really good for. But getting Monty Williams is a big upgrade, I feel like, on the court. Much more creative offensively, not as stale of an offense. Has some previous success running with 2 guards like Devin Booker and CP3 when the Pistons are their 2 best players. Looks to be the same kind of thing. Cade Cunningham Jane Ivey, 2 guards. I'm really interested to see how he uses both of those guys. If he brings over some of the sets and some of the things he ran with Devin Booker and CP3 over in Phoenix. But yeah, I think that's a big addition because I think the Pistons offense has been a big issue. The lack of creativity with their offense was a big issue. We talked about on the podcast a lot how they're at the bottom of the league in passes per game. They're like the bottom of the league when it came to who holds on to the ball the longest per touch. So the ball really stuck with the Pistons and not a lot of passing ball movement. And I think that's going to change with Monty Williams and his quote-unquote 0.5 offense that they've been talking about.
There's 2 things that we are going to learn this season. One of them is Monty Williams had issues with DeAndre Ayton and Jay Crowder that led to big problems, right? Ayton was disengaged. Crowder literally just sat out. We'll see. Is that a Crowder and Ayton issue, or is that a Monty Williams issue who has been praised for being this great locker room guy, but when you have these 2 big issues with key players, I've got to see where that goes. The other thing we're going to find out, Koo, is if some of the asinine coaching and rotation decisions were Dwayne Casey or whether they're being pushed on him by somebody else with a different sort of agenda, the guy that maybe brought those players onto the team. So I think some of the decisions we'll see from Monty Williams in terms of rotations, yes, they paid him a lot and there's obviously a lot of influence there, but we'll see whether was all of that nonsense Dwayne Casey or was it perhaps coming from somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main part of the rotation where you'll see like that kind of war really play out is probably with like what happens with James Wiseman. I think that's going to be it's going to be interesting how they use him. I'm interested to see how many minutes he plays, what role he's necessarily going to be playing on the court, and how long of a leash he really gets. Because when the Pistons acquired him, it was like, yeah, he needs a lot of reps. If you're going to believe in his future and think he can get to that future, the only way he's going to get to that future you believe in is if he gets a lot of reps. And at the time, it was, the Pistons are so bad, they'll be able to give him plenty of reps, whether this year, next year, blah, blah. But now they've went out and got all these vets that you've just listed, Monty Morris, Joe Harris. They got Monty Williams. So do they really have time to just be handing out reps for that? I don't know. So it's going to be that will be the one area where I think that's going to play out.
It's not even that, which yes, he needs reps, but at some point, like, Troy Weaver has this obsession with, well, he was drafted high, must have been drafted high for a reason. Yeah, the reason was they made a mistake. Like, that's the reason why he was drafted high. But you can say that, and the Pistons don't have anything to lose. They can develop him, but they sort of do, because they've got a player who's clearly better and younger in Jalen Duren. And if you screw up his development as well, then what do you have? 2 failed options instead of one who might be good and one who isn't? Like, that's my problem with it. And then it screws up things for spacing and touches for guards and all that sort of stuff. Like, so it's like, it's all fine. It doesn't mean anything. Let's just see what happens. Like, I don't find that that's exactly true just because of the impact that it has on players at his same position, but also other guys down roster as well. So we'll see what they do. If they go back into that, I'm going to be pretty frustrated, as I'm sure you are. But the big question on this team, there's a lot of questions, but the big question, Koo, is Cade is ready to go, yeah? Missed that most of last season with that leg stress fracture. We're seeing all these reports coming out. I was massively high on him at the beginning of last season. He struggled with his shot in those first 10 games, which of course doesn't mean that he was going to be a bad shooter for the next 70, but then he was done. He was out for the season. So we are ready. Year 3 Cade is here. He's taking over, we hope.
Yeah, so I know as of right now, I've spoken with his trainer. And obviously we saw what happened at the team, or we've heard about what's happened with the Team USA camp versus select team. I had Ben Golliver on the podcast, and he was in attendance for those games and the overall camp. And he talked about how Cade just wowed everybody in the gym. He really was turning everyone's heads. And everyone was just in awe of how great he was playing. Ben Golliver said on my podcast, he believes that from what he's heard, that if Cade wasn't dealing with this leg thing and wanted to really be focused on his 3rd year, he would have been not only on the team for this Team USA, he think he could have been competing for a starting spot in the Team USA team. That's how high they are on him. And I can confirm that I've talked with his trainer, and Cade's been he's feeling good. He's feeling good. He's healed up. His offseason is not being derailed or anything. He's having his full offseason. He's back to 100%. He's gonna have to get his conditioning under him. He's gonna have to get back to playing 5-on-5 basketball. Like, all that stuff's still gonna knock off some rust. But overall, health-wise, he should be completely healthy. And, yeah, I expect a really big year for him this year.
The surgery that he had on that stress fracture, from my understanding, is that when they do those surgeries, the success rate of them is very, very high, and the likelihood of recurrence of that injury is very low once you do that surgery. Is that the same sort of thing you've heard?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was told and why they made the decision, him or Cade, his team, the Pistons, why they decided to go with the surgery. I'm sure they will never admit this, but I feel like obviously a little bit had to do with, I guess we could just tank this year for Wemby, and that could help. I think that played a little
100%.
bit. Yeah, I had one of my friends, he's in the medical field. I had him on the podcast and talked with him about it. And yeah, basically that's why I was told that once you have this surgery, it's the whole point of it is to, like you said, kind of, take away as much chance possible of something like this coming up again and dealing with it moving forward. And he also talked with Cade. He had someone on the team, Rodney Magruder, who had the same type of surgery. Cade and Tim Hardaway Jr., who's been rumored to be Pistons interested in earlier in the summer with the Mavs. He had that surgery, and him and Cade have become really close over that surgery. He helped them decide about going with that surgery. But yeah, overall, that's exactly what I've heard as well.
I think Drew Holiday had it as well, if I'm not mistaken. If he didn't,
Yeah.
he did have the same problem as Cade early in his career, and it's been 10 years and nothing's happened since then. So, yeah, I'm fairly confident of that. The other one is Isaiah Stewart, who sat out the end of last season with an injury to his shoulder. Well, it was an injury, but he was fine. We're not worried about him coming back, are we?
No, I'm not too concerned about. Well, okay, there are some things I'm concerned about with Stu, the player, but not the shoulder. No, I'm not concerned about it at all.
All right, so let's get into... Actually, we won't get into that just yet because I do need to tell people that today's episode, if I could find it, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel, well, the NFL is here. Preseason is here. It's done. We're ready. We're started. It's all on. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time that they win in the regular season. Just pick a team to win the Super Bowl. Maybe it's the trendy pick, the Detroit Lions. And every time they win, you get bonus bets for every victory. And you can use those bonus bets on spreads, on player props, on over-unders, and more. Is this year the Pistons win a playoff game?
I don't know.
Well,
if
you say no, you've got historically you would say you've got a chance of being a lot more correct. But I do believe in the Lions. I'm very excited to see if they can get back into the playoffs and make some noise. And if you believe that as well, you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, your projected starting five. I 100% agree with you that this is what I think that they will start with. I don't know whether you agree with me in saying that this isn't what I would do, but Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Bojan Bogdanovic, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. I think there is almost no doubt they start this way, and again, it's not what I would do. I have put this out in previous tweets and Instagram posts, and people disagree with me. So no way. Like Asar Thompson's definitely starting, or James Wiseman's definitely starting, but I don't see any way they don't run out this group unless there's a trade between now and opening night.
I agree with you. I wouldn't start this five. I think it's 100% that this is the five they will start. But I would start. There's a few other lines. Actually, I have probably like 2 to 3 other lineups I think probably will be better lineups. Maybe not better starting line. They won't ever start them. But I think throughout the year, by the end of the 82-game season, there will be multiple other lineups that are better than this one. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Bojan, Asar, and Jalen Duren. I think that would go well. I think even Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Bojan, Isaiah Livers, and Jalen Duren would probably be a little bit better. And then you could get crazy with it, but I'm not going to. The overall concern with the starting five is just Isaiah Stewart. Is he actually going to be an outside shooter? Because if he isn't, you're really weighing down the spacing of this lineup. And it's not like he does a lot of other great things either offensively to make up for that. Like the whole thing is he has to be able to shoot offensively to make it worth it. And I know he had a good like 20 games of shooting really well from deep last year. And then he had the shoulder injury and really crashed back down. He ended up at 32%. Overall, it's all a small sample size. So it's hard to know what exactly is going to happen. But yeah, I think this is the starting five that they're going to end up going with. Yeah,
my problem with Stewart, and I've been a critic of Isaiah Stewart as a player, is that I just think he's overtasked in this role. I think that he doesn't move like he's a four. Like he's obviously big and strong, but he's not tall enough to be a full-time center. He doesn't shoot it well enough or often enough or have any sort of stuff off the dribble or attacking closeouts to be an offensive threat that way. Defensively, he's pretty good, but he's probably better defensively in the paint, and then he's he's not big enough to do that. So to me, his role, like when the team is actually going to be good, it's just an energy big reserve. Like that's what he is. And they keep trying to force him into different positions, and they've paid him a contract extension, which is sort of the amount of money you pay someone who's going to be like a sixth man starting sometimes not. But like no offense to Stewart, but at some point, like we need to understand what these players' long-term roles are, and I just don't see this as maybe he completely just changes everything. But when you watch him play, he just doesn't move like a four. He doesn't move like the sort of player you want out there at that position. To me, if I've got a four, it's someone that I want to be able to switch down to play the three at times as well and be able to guard those sort of guys, whereas I don't think there's any hope of Stewart being able to do that, really.
So Pistons fans love Stu.
Oh, yeah,
and
of course.
Saying anything,
they should.
Saying anything remotely bad about him will get the pitchforks out and the torches. It's crazy. But I share a lot of the concerns that you have. Defensively, the thing about Stu defensively is the biggest pro about him defensively is that he has good versatility when switching on the guards. He's not someone that you want doing it all the time, but he has good versatility and can do it. So, but the concern, like the idea there is that's something you probably would like out of your backup five. Like you want your five to be able to switch out on the guards. Not necessarily you want him doing, guarding wings full time. Like he can switch onto those guys, and that's kind of valuable as a five to be able to switch out. But full time, I also have a little bit of concern about him being able to do those kind of things full time. Also offensively for me, defensively, I'm not too concerned about him. If he's not great at that full time, I don't think he's going to be bad. I think he'll be fine defensively. Offensively, he's one of the worst finishing bigs so far with the last few years in the NBA. He doesn't have very good hands, and while he flashes sometimes some connective reads and sometimes flashes every now and then he'll attack a closeout and do something, it's nothing more than a flash, and he doesn't do it good enough for you to come on here and say, yeah, that's something he's going to be able to do this year. So you're basically relying everything on the fact that he'll be able to shoot threes and that he'll be the shooter he was the first 25 games of last year. And if he's not that, it's like, it's just very, I agree with you. I think his role down the line is just a backup big, and there's nothing wrong with that. Pistons fans, a lot of Pistons fans think that's like a demotion and it's terrible and you're hating on Stu. That's probably it's not probably, it is going to be his best role down the line. As this is a backup guy who can give you good minutes, play hard, energize the game, and switch on defense. And I think that's what he's going to end up being.
Mate, if you get a long-term backup big man or backup 4 or 5 at pick 16 in the draft, that's a huge W. Like, that's just what it is. And you mentioned he's one of the worst finishing big men in the league, so I had to look it up. 7th percentile amongst big men at rim percentage finishing, and even compared to all big men, 32nd percentile in three-point shooting. And that's just not the guy that I want to be playing out there. I don't want to make this the Isaiah Stewart show, because we could talk about him all day. I think he's a valuable player. I just think that he's maybe overtaken. This is, again, back to that problem, is that the reason he can't play a ton of backup center is there's two other guys that getting backup center minutes most likely who they seem committed to giving those minutes to, and that brings us to the rest of your rotation. You've got Monte Morris, which I agree, Alec Burks, Asar Thompson, Isaiah Livers, and you've gone with James Wiseman there as the backup center over Marvin Bagley. Now, Koo, let me put this to you. James Wiseman is bad. All right, I'll put that to you as my number one thing. Marvin Bagley, who I also think is bad, is better than James Wiseman. But I do think they might actually give these minutes to Wiseman over Bagley, and it is a real concern to me of all of those trickle-down effects. People will look at some of his counting stats from Summer League. I watched him in person. I thought he was bad there as well. Why are they so committed? They were so committed to Marvin Bagley as a former number 2 overall pick? They traded for him and then paid him a above market contract, and then pushed him to the side and bring the new flavor of the month in there. Like, I have seen no evidence so far to suggest that he is worthy of any sort of investment at this point. But that does seem that they are going to want to try it, and heaven forbid they put him and Duren together.
If they try to continue with the double big stuff, that's when we'll have a problem. If they continue to try to play Duren and Wiseman together, that's going to be a big issue. That's when you start talking about weighing down entire lineups, start weighing down spacing, start making life terrible on Cade Cunningham, on Jalen Ivey, Asar Thompson. Like, that's when you start doing that. As far as the backup five, I just I can't see them not giving James Wiseman all those minutes with how glowingly they speak about him, with how much they seem to, like you said, have committed themselves to his development. I do believe that Bagley's better than Wiseman. I just talked about this on the podcast like 2 weeks ago. I think Bagley's better at Wiseman than all the things Wiseman's supposed to be good at.
Yep.
Bagley's just a better version of him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be honest, like, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't the biggest Bagley fan, but like the last 20 games of the season last year, he actually did start to show some things that Wiseman doesn't. Like, Bagley's just a better player right now.
Yep.
If I was going off of who, like, the best lineup and the best 5 to play, I'd put Bagley there. I just don't think they're going to go Bagley over Wiseman because Wiseman's younger. He theoretically has the higher ceiling. He's the one that needs more reps. He's the guy that Weaver had. I think he had top 3 on his board before his draft. He's the guy that we keep hearing all these things about. So while I don't think he's better than Bagley right now, I think he's the one that gets the minutes nonetheless.
Yeah, look, there's a reason that I call James Wiseman Marvin Bagley the fourth, because they're the same player. He's just a worse version. Like, it's simple as that. Like, he's just not as good as him. And while I am the biggest Marvin Bagley hater in terms of what his actual value is, you're right. Because I talk about this all the time. He figured out what his role is. Come in, play 20 minutes a night, put up some shots, grab some rebounds, and do the things. Like, he's never going to be a featured guy. He's never going to be a shooter. He's not a defender. He's not a passer. He doesn't do any of those things. But he came in, he did his little thing in 18 minutes a night or whatever it was, and it was good at doing it. And that is absolutely what you want from a player like that, to figure out, hey, this is how I'm going to survive. I need to do these couple of things. This interesting part here is some of the teams I've done when I look at players that are under the age of 23, there's like 2 players on the team. The Pistons have, I'm just going to count them up here, a lot, because I can't count. There's 9 players under the age of 23 currently on this roster. And a lot of them are core guys: Cunningham, Duren, Ivey, Asar. There's 4 key guys in that group who are starters. And we've talked about Cunningham and Stewart. We haven't really spoken about Ivey or Asar at this point. There's also Killian Hayes, Marcus Sasser, who's just about to turn 23. I want to talk about Jalen Duren, because I thought he was really impressive last season. I don't know whether the Pistons believe the same thing as me, because again, I just wouldn't have been marginalizing his development time to give development time to worse players. Where do you see Duren? Now, there were some positive comments in the offseason. Well, he's the only guy we're not putting a ceiling on in terms of minutes, but there are other people out there who go, well, maybe they might actually do a stupid 24 minute split here. What is Duren's outlook for this year?
Oh, I'm not worried about Duren at all. There was a moment where I also shared the whole, they better not, sacrifice his development for James Wiseman. But I'm not concerned about that at this point anymore. I think from what I've heard, they're fully aware of what they have with Jalen Duren. They know that Jalen Duren is him. That dude, people don't understand that he was literally the youngest player in the NBA last year. And you don't see guys play that well as the youngest player in the NBA. Like, it's just how well he played at his age and how big and strong and like how mature his body is already. It's just crazy. I think Jalen Duren is going to be fantastic this season. I don't expect him. A lot of Pistons fans are already, expecting some crazy jump from him already. And I kind of always say, like, he's probably like 6-7 years away from his prime. Like, he still has a while to get there, but nonetheless, he's going to be really good. The stuff that he has he's already pretty good at. You saw it. At least we heard about it popping off in the Team USA camp as well with Cade Cunningham. So I think Jalen Duren is going to be fantastic this year. I think he's going to play 30+ minutes, and I think he's going to be really good for this team, especially playing with Cade. I think there's a slight chance. Now, don't bookmark me on this, but there is a slight chance that because Duren is now going to be playing with Cade, and Cade loves having himself a lob threat and playing pick and roll, I think there's a slight chance you see a better season from Duren than you do Ivey this year because of that reason.
I think that's reasonable. I think we saw a better season from Duren than Ivey last season. Points aren't everything. But that does bring us on to Jaden Ivey, who was the pick. I thought 100% the correct pick there. I would have taken him higher than that. The fit with Cade is still a little bit weird in ways, and we really saw Ivey's numbers start to improve when Cade went down, and then at the end of the season when he had the ball in his hands more. But now you've got Cade Cunningham back. You've got another guy who does handle the ball somewhat in Asar Thompson. So what's the key here for Ivey? Does he need to be able to work into being a more of an off-ball guy, the way that, say, Bradley Beal has played in the past, where you can handle a little bit, but that's not your full-time role? Because I don't think he's going to be, well, I don't think you want him to be that guy who's controlling the pace of play the entire time that he's out there, because you want Cade to be doing that. So did you see things from Ivey that make you think that he's going to be able to succeed next to Cade, or is that fit not going to work long-term?
I'm not concerned about their fit together much at all. Let me not say much at all. There is obviously there's some things that they're going to have to work through, but I'm not concerned about it happening. I think they're going to fit well together at Purdue. I didn't watch a lot of them at Purdue, but from a lot of people I've talked to, he played a lot of off-ball actions at Purdue, shot a lot of off-ball movement threes. And then even this past season in his rookie year, I don't have it in front of me, but on Synergy, last time I checked, I believe he was in like the 84th percentile on open catch and shoot threes. He shot like 40-something% on those, on open catch and shoot threes. So he was a better shooter on good looks than his overall three-point shooting numbers say on the season. So I actually think he will provide spacing. And even over the last like 20 or so games, the Pistons started to run some off-ball actions for him that got him some movement threes, and he was hitting quite a few of them. So I do think there's some versatility that he has playing off ball that we didn't necessarily get to see this past season because Cade was out. And there was a point, it was a little bit confusing for me at the time because I was a Killian Hayes believer at that moment. But in the middle of Killian's stretch when he was playing really well, they moved Killian to the bench and kind of went to this, we're going to put the ball in Ivey's hands, and we want Ivey to develop as a point guard. So you didn't get to see as much of Ivey off ball as you're going to see probably this year with Cade, but I think he's going to do pretty well with it. When he did play with Cade in the first 10 games, I went through and looked at and charted all the assists that Cade had to Ivey, cutting to the rim, moving off ball. He moved really well off ball off of Cade in those first 10 games, and I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. As long as he continues to shoot as well as he did on open catch and shoot threes, I don't think that it will be too much of an issue. My concern more so is on the defensive end with Ivey, but offensively, I think he'll fit fine with Cade.
The Killian Hayes thing that you mentioned, and I noticed you didn't have him in your rotation, which I agree with. They're not making those other moves to have a big part with Killian, who did show some stuff defensively, but the offense is still a disaster. My criticism of that when they moved Hayes to the bench was that is what Ivey's going to have to do, is play next to a guy who is running the offense. So why are you not getting him to develop those sort of skills there? Obviously, Killian and Cade are different sorts of players, but just let's see if we can develop something where he is not running everything, because he's always going to put up numbers in that role, but he's not going to have that role quite as often as I guess he would hope. Let's talk again back to this question. Are we going to see these two center lineups again? I'm not even including Isaiah Stewart as a center now because, again, down the stretch, I don't think he played like a minute of center really, because they were playing Bagley and Wiseman and Duren there. And I don't, honestly, unless there's injuries, I don't think Stewart's going to play really any center at all this season either. I'm talking the combination of Duren and Wiseman, or Duren and Bagley, or Wiseman and Wiseman Senior. I don't know how that is. Is this a Weaver thing? Yes. Is he going to be forced on Monty Williams? Because Williams never ran that sort of stuff in Phoenix.
I very desperately want to say no. I really don't want to see it. Do I think we will see it at some point? Probably. We'll probably see it in some stretches. I can't. Wiseman, some of the noise around Wiseman has been that he slimmed down so much, and that he's trying to become more mobile, and he's getting all that stuff. And then even in Summer League, they played him and Duren together.
They did. Almost
the entirety that they were down there. So do I think they're going to do it a lot? No. But all of that makes me believe it's something that they're going to throw it out there every now and then. And I'm probably not going to like it each time they do it, but it'll probably happen every now and then.
I've got no problem with them doing it as long as it doesn't take minutes away from other guys who should be playing in those roles, Livers or Thompson or whoever it is, taking minutes away from other lineups that make more sense. If you're in a situation where you're absolutely strapped and nobody else can get out there, then sure, go for it. Who cares? But when it's taking away other minutes from other guys, that's when the problem arises, I think. What's the biggest change that Monty Williams brings, apart from lightening Tom Gauze's bank account?
Definitely offensively. I went through and looked at Monty Williams outside of when they acquired Kevin Durant. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I went through and talked about this on a podcast a few weeks ago, that Phoenix's offense, how much they passed the ball, the average second per touch was just infinitely higher, or lower, I should say, than the Pistons over the last few years. And that's something that they've desperately needed in Detroit. The ball sticks way too much, and I expect the ball to move a lot quicker and more often offensively. And look, I know there's a lot of talk. Heck, I'm a part of it. There's a lot of talk of what's the best way to build around Cade Cunningham? Is he best suited in a heliocentric offense like Team USA had him running in the scrimmage apparently that he took off in? Is he best utilized like that, like Luka, like Harden was, like Trey was in Atlanta a few years ago when they made the Eastern Conference Finals? Like, is that the best way to go about it? Or is it to kind of go with this new trend that you're kind of seeing in the NBA when there's multiple guys on the floor that can ball handle, that can attack a gap, that can make a read off a drive and kick, all that stuff, that have multiple guys on the floor, kind of like you just saw with Denver, Jokic, Gordon, Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, Jamal Murray, having multiple guys on there. It looks like that's the route the Pistons are going. Troy Weaver really spoke about it a lot. Even Asar Thompson spoke about it a lot after he was drafted, immediately after. It's actually crazy to him get that in depth about it as soon as he was drafted. But that looks like how they're going to go about it. And if you're going to go about that way, you need to have someone who really enforces free flowing and ball movement and good decision making and quick decision making. I think that's the biggest difference you'll see with Monty and Dwayne.
I think that the ideal scenario, look, I don't think that Cade can necessarily thrive in a Luka size role. It's like a 38, 36% usage role, whatever it is. I'm not sure he does that, but as some sort of hybrid between what Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander do with Oklahoma City, where obviously he's going to be a better shooter than Josh Giddey. He's probably not quite the level of passer, but he can sort of control things the way Shai does, but not quite the level of driver. Sort of a mix between those two guys, I think is more of a... Now, Shai was a pretty high usage player, but not quite to the level of what Luka was. So I think something like that is probably... Or I don't know why I didn't go the easy example, just Devin Booker, where from Monty Williams' old team. Like, that's sort of... Yeah, and we're going to see more of that from Booker this season, running as a point guard, I think. So we'll see how that all works out. Now, the question here we get to... Now, I am a noted... I was taking the piss earlier when I was saying that I'm a Pistons hater, because I'm not. I just try to look at things objectively. I am a Troy Weaver hater. I just think that he is one of the worst GMs in the league, and I will continue to think that. I think he's made a couple of okay moves, but I've made it, mainly it is, I just disagree with almost every basketball philosophy he seems to have. Now, there were quite a few things here that have happened over the last couple of years, but mainly the coaching thing in the offseason, where it just seemed that him and Tom Gores were on completely different pages with the coaching, and now it seems that Gores got his way, and we didn't get Kevin Ollie in here as the head coach. So how long is Troy Weaver's leash here? Like, if this doesn't pan out, if these players that don't pan out, is this it for him? Like, where is that relationship, or is it still like, no, Troy is, trust in Troy, he's doing everything here?
I think that we're at least another year away before there's talk about Weaver's seat being warm. I think his job is pretty secure. I can't imagine what would have to happen this year and for things to just for his seat to really get warm. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he has pretty good job security right now. And with the head coaching thing, my read on it, based on everything that I had read and some of the things I had heard, was it felt like, and again, this isn't me trying to report anything. This is me reading between the lines somewhat. It felt like Weaver wanted to go more development this season. He didn't want to go full on into it yet. He felt like the team needed another year and kind of wanted to take it a little bit more slower, which is why he wanted Kevin Ollie, who was the head development coach at OTE. He wanted to kind of go with his guys, develop his guys, and continue to go that route. And it didn't seem like, obviously, like Tom Gores very much was on that route. And eventually, obviously, Tom Gores got his wish. Monty Williams, a great hire. I'm very happy that they ended up with that. But Weaver, I think his leash is pretty long. Outside of I guess if Cade, Ivey, and Asar and all of them turned out to just be bad. Like if this year they started playing, they just weren't good, and now it looks like he's missed on multiple picks, then maybe his seat could get pretty hot. But all four of those guys, people are pretty high on. So I don't think. I think it would have to take that to happen for his seat to get warm this year.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that there's going to be any movement to fire him because I think all these guys are good. Like, I definitely would have taken Cade at 1. I would have taken Ivey at 5. I would have taken Asar, or I would have taken Hendricks at 5. No problem with any of those moves. It's more some of the other stuff that I have concerns with. Like, I don't understand. Like, I think getting Monte Morris and Joe Harris on those deals, completely fine, right? Really good pieces of work. I don't understand trading up to draft an undersized older point guard in Marcus Sasser when your 2 top 5 picks, or 3 top 5 picks over the last 3 years are all ball handlers in Thompson and Cade and Ivey. Would Sasser have been there at 31? Maybe not. Does it matter if you missed out? I don't know. Like, there's just a few things like, what's the process here? Why are we giving up picks for James Wiseman when it doesn't make any sense for him on this roster? That's where my issue is. But none of that stuff's going to have any sort of impact on him being fired. It's more just that difference in opinion with the ownership through this prolonged coaching search. And people might say, well, the Ollie stuff wasn't real. It was 100% real. Like, Troy Weaver wanted Kevin Ollie there. He believes he's a really good coach. Like, he wanted that. And I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, but again, I am admittedly just completely diametrically opposed to basically everything Troy Weaver does in terms of basketball building philosophies. Who's your breakout candidate on this team?
Jalen Duren. I think Jalen. A lot of fans, I think, are probably going to say Jay and Ivy. I'm not going to say Cade because I feel like that would be like a weak answer. That would be like taking the easy way out. That I don't feel like that's fair. But I'll say Jalen Duren.
People in the fantasy space really hated on Cade last season, but he averaged 26 and 6. Like, they're pretty good numbers. And it was only 11 games, and he shot really poorly, 29% from 3. But a 10-game sample size or 11-game sample size for shooting doesn't mean anything. Not to say he was going to be a good shooter, but the guy averaged 26 and 6. Like, if he comes out and gets 24, 6, and 8 this season, that's not a surprise. Like, that's really the trajectory that the guy is heading. What do you think the one thing is that Duren needs to really step up? Now, I don't think he's ever going to be this offensive maestro or anything like that. I was a little bit disappointed in some of his rim protection and stuff, so that's probably the one thing I'd be looking at with him. But again, he's still 19.
No, that I agree. Defense would be the thing I think he needs to really take the next step in to really break out. It's rim protection, overall feel and drop coverage. He needs to improve on. I know they've tried to use him, make him pretty versatile in different defensive schemes that he can run. I know they tried, like I said, drop. They've tried switching him. They played high on the screens. They did a lot of different stuff with them. Hopefully to see him get better at those things, to see him become more versatile, but overall just a better rim protector as well. Because he did flash. There were stretches where he flashed like, whoa, this dude's like just really setting everything back and just deterring a lot of things. And then there were stretches where it was like, okay, he didn't read that right, or he was late on this one, or late. And he's the youngest player in the league. You expect to see that, but I think that area, I don't need to see him trying to do post hooks and shooting threes or anything. Like, that's not what what you need to see from him is become like a legit defensive big guy, protecting the rim.
To put it into perspective, he is 2 years younger than Jaden Ivey, and he is a year younger than Asar Thompson, who still hasn't played an NBA game. So yeah, like, he's still really, really young, and there's still plenty of development happening here. What about? It's really hard on a team with like 8 blokes under the age of 23. Who's a regression candidate? I think I know the one.
Oh God, that's a tough one. I don't think Cade is going to step back. I think Cade's going to take a step up. Not Jalen Duren.
I think it might be the 34-year-old bloke who averaged 20 points a game last season because.
Cade so I can pick anyone,
yeah,
not just the young guys.
Not pick anyone. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Then yeah, I'll pick Bojan simply because Bojan. I don't think what he did last year is capable or sustainable. I think he probably had his best offensive season this past year, and I don't think he. I think he'll. I don't know. I think he's going to continue to get worse defensively, and he already wasn't good defensively this past year. If he can maintain the offensive play that he had last year, he'll come close to making up for the defense. Because this past season, his on-off was like minus 0.3. If he can stay around that, then fair enough. But like another year, getting older, if he continues to shoot like that, man, it's fair enough. But
I think it's going to be tough. Like, he's 34 now. He had a career high 26% usage. He shot 41% from 3. He just did so much stuff and he had to because Cade wasn't there, but he doesn't have to anymore. So there's almost no way he's playing as much as he did, or he's shooting as much as he did, or getting as much touches, or being the focal point of the offense, which is what he is. Who's the most likely player to be traded, and is it the same 34-year-old starting forward?
No, I'd say Killian Hayes.
Oh, and how are you going to feel about that when that happens, Koo?
I'm depending on the team he goes to, I'll be excited. I really want Killian to get off the team and go somewhere that gives him a chance to fight for the backup spot and really continue development, because I thought he showed some progression this past year, and there's some reason to believe that he might be coming around. He's still really young. He's younger than Jane. I believe he's younger than Jane Ivey.
He is, yeah.
He just turned 22, I believe like 2 weeks ago or something. So there's some reason to believe that he might have been putting some things together, but yeah, I don't think he has any room left in Detroit. It's over for him here.
Ivy's actually like 6 months younger, than Killian. He just turned 22. Ivey is 21 and a half, it looks like, but he is still younger than Isaiah Stewart and recently drafted point guard Marcus Sasser. All right.
Yes, that was what I was looking at.
Yeah. Let's go to our win projections, because despite what people might tell me, they were the worst team in the NBA. Josh, have you never heard of a rebuild? Yeah, I have. They still were the worst team in the NBA last season with a 17-65 record, minus 8.6 net rating, which was 28th. FanDuel's got them up at 27.5 wins, which is big. That's over 10 extra wins from last season. And Q, you've said screw that. I'm going bigger. 32 wins. I'm probably less excited. 24, just because I think there's a lot of other good teams, and I'm still not sure where they go. But they can take big steps forward this season. There's no doubt about that. But that's a lofty number, Q. So let me rephrase it this way. If they don't hit 32, is it a failure of a season?
No, so I don't think it would be a failure, because I do think 32 is like that would be a really, really good season, I think. I think it would be a failure. Honestly, I'm not going to lie to you. I think if they won 24 games, your question earlier about Troy Weaver might actually be like worth it. Like, I think they might actually be discussing if they only won 24 games.
Good.
Because the team, I know for a fact that the team feels like that if Cade was healthy, they may not have been much better, but they wouldn't have been 17 games bad. They would have been like 22, 21 games won. And then now, instead of looking at, like, if you're going off my projection, like 32 wins, instead of looking at a 15 game increase, you'd be looking at like a 8-9 game increase. So they don't feel like that jump. They don't feel like getting to like 32 games would be really reflective of jumping 15 spots, because they don't feel like they would have been that bad if Cade was healthy.
I agree on that.
So
they could have been a 23. They could have been a 24 win team last season, and maybe me being 24 here is a little bit low. But I just think you got to get the wins from somewhere. Like, someone's got to lose for you to get the wins, and I think a lot of other teams did improve this season too. I've got the Pistons improving quite a bit. So we'll say, like, even the Wizards, who tore it down, I'm not sure they're that bad, because they sort of rebuilt, but they didn't, because Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma are still there. So I don't know. We'll see how it all goes. It is going to be interesting. But now it's time for the fun, Q. It's time for us to play the gritty, which is my name for this Pistons-specific.
Oh my goodness.
Pistons-specific grid game. You know how it works. We're picking one player per square. They've got to play for both teams. You can't double up. If you get it wrong, bad luck. We can't do rarity scores, because it is just you versus the grid. But what we can do is I'm awarding scores to all of the hosts based on one factor. We look at all the players that played, say, for Detroit and Washington. And then I look at the games they played for either team. And then I get whatever the lowest of those two numbers are and rank all of those players by the lowest games they played. So if they played 100 games for the Pistons and 1 game for the Wizards, well, that's a really good score, because they only appeared once in a Wizards uniform. And then the 5 assists per game means they have to have averaged 5 assists per game in a single season while playing for the Detroit Pistons. So where do you want to start here?
I have a quick question. Does Monty Morris count?
They need to have played in a game for the Detroit Pistons. So you want to get them at least in one game.
Okay, so I got a few already. Okay, so for the Pistons Wizards, I got Ish Smith.
Ish Smith is just absolute grid game legend. Ish Smith. Oh, it's not a he played quite a few games. That's not a terrible score. So I'm going to give you what is the score for Ish here? He gets a 38.4. It's on a scale of 0 to 100. So you get 38.4 for Ish in the Pistons Wizards, because he played 140 games for Washington and 219 for Detroit. The highest one in that grouping, Rick Mahorn was the highest in that group. And there was some random blokes by the name of like Wally Jones and Steve Malovich who were the lowest scores. Never heard of those guys. I'm sure you probably haven't either. All right.
No, I have not.
Where do we want to go? They sound like they're from 1932. Where are we going to go next?
Okay, so the next one I'm going to go with the Pistons. So the Pistons Raptors one has to average 5 assists a game too, right?
No, that they just have to. It's just Pistons Raptors. The last one is just Pistons and 5 assists per game. So we're just doing Pistons Raptors for this one.
Then that changes my answer. Okay. I was going to say Jose Calderon, but now I'm going to change it to Svi Mikhailuk.
Pistons Raptors. Svi Mikhailuk, Raptors legend. All right, he actually. Wow, This is a weird one because there's not a huge amount of actual crossover between these two teams. So while Svi didn't play huge amounts of games, he still gives you a score of 30.73 because he played 56 for Toronto and 95 for Detroit. But there's just so few guys. The lowest scoring player that I even recognize is our old mate Henry Allenson. Played 2 games for Toronto. Do you remember that one?
Oh, he played it all for them? I didn't know he played.
Apparently he did. I don't remember that at all, but apparently he did. He played 2 games for Toronto. It feels like it's a bubble situation, but I don't know. All right, let's. Who else? Which one are we going with next?
Okay, so my score is just not going to be low, man. It's going to be so high because all the names I'm thinking of are just like popular names. All right, so for the Nets,
all right.
I'm gonna go for the Nets. I'm gonna pick Spencer Dinwiddie.
The Nets, yeah, that's a good one. Spencer, yeah, that's not too bad. All right, so Spencer Dinwiddie started obviously in Detroit, coming off that torn ACL, coming out of college. Yeah, that's where he tore it. I'm just looking at his number, as I just completely lose my place. 21.53, so not bad. We're not pushing above 50. 21.53. He played he played quite a bit for the Nets, but that doesn't matter because he only played 46 games for the Pistons. The lowest score that I can see of people that I know on this list, there's some bloke by the name of Bubbles Hawkins, which again is a very fake name. I don't even know who these low score guys are. Pace Mannion. Wow, there's just Dante Hall. There you go. Dante Hall played 4 games for the Pistons and 5 for the Nets. All right, what are we doing next? We've got Bulls, Jazz, or the 5 assists per game?
All right. Did Anthony Tolliver play for the Jazz?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and take the easy way out here with this one because I don't want to take the chance of Anthony Tolliver not playing for the Jazz. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go ahead and just. I'm gonna get laughed at for this one. I'm just gonna go Bojan with the Jazz, man. Just give me Bojan.
Bojan Bogdanovic is a correct answer, but Crew, you're not going to get laughed at because remember, Bojan has played 1 season in Detroit and he didn't even play the full season, so he's only played 50 games for the 59 games for the Pistons. So that's a 28.86. So that's fine.
Oh, okay.
So he didn't play. Like, let's look at some other interesting one. Walt Bellamy apparently played 1 game for the Jazz. Here's one for you. I didn't know this existed. Greg Monroe, Pistons legend, played 3 games for Utah. I don't know when that happened either.
I should have known that one.
I didn't know. When did he play for Utah? I don't know when that happened. These random. Greg Monroe is a great answer. He's played for all these random teams for like 2 games. All right, we've got the Bulls and we've got 5 assists per game.
Okay, the Bulls. The easy one would just be D Rose, man. But D Rose played a lot of.
He played a lot of games for Chicago. Yeah, he didn't play a huge amount for Detroit.
I'll go D Rose with the Bulls.
It is again. It's a popular answer, but to be honest, I do forget that Derrick Rose did play for Detroit at times. It's only a 25 for Derrick Rose there because he only played 65 games for Detroit. Wow, that's a low number. All right, last one. 5 assists per game. Let me tell you how many guys have actually done this in Pistons history. 21 players. And the way you get a good score here is a player who has played the fewest games in their Detroit Pistons career, who has had a season of averaging 5 assists per game, and there's no qualifier. They don't have to have played 1,000 minutes in that season for it to qualify. So, who are we going with here?
I'm going to go with Jose Calderon here.
Is he on there? Jose Calderon is on this list, and he is a pretty good option because let me tell you the score that Jose gives you. It is a 7.02.
Let's go. That's the best one right there.
He played 77 games. The thing you could have done is Cade Cunningham's only played 76 games in his Pistons career. Jaden Ivey's only played 74 games in his Pistons career as well, and they've averaged 5 assists per game. But one of the best one you could have given was Derek Walton, played 6 games for the Pistons, and apparently he averaged 5 assists per game in 1 season. It probably was only.
I was for real thinking Derek Walton. But I didn't know if you got to 5 assists a game.
He came through in one of those COVID years, didn't he, as a replacement guy, then started and played like 4 games as starters minutes, and then disappeared completely. Yeah. So there you go. That was been the best answer there, but. You did well, Koo. You got all of them right. You didn't get any score over 50. That is a really good result from you. Now tell everyone what is happening over at Locked On Pistons.
Yeah, we're still going 3 to 4 days a week. We just had Ben Galver on the podcast to talk about the Team USA. He was in person. He was there at the camp. So it was really good hearing from someone who was in person at that. Before that, we had Asar Thompson, his trainer and former lead trainer now of OTE on the podcast, Luke Cooper. He provided a lot of insight into Asar's work ethic, provided some really cool stories. Real quickly, let me just say, there's this popular story going around about Asar Thompson going and practicing at outdoor parks because his high school gym has been closed. I just want to say this. James' article was great, but I had that we got that story out on the podcast a few days before. So technically, not to toot my own horn, but we might have gotten that from Luke a few days before. But also we got Cade Cunningham's brother on the podcast too a few weeks ago. He came in person actually and recorded in person with us. That was super dope. A really good episode, gave us a lot of insight. So we got a lot of fun guests coming on. So go ahead and stay tuned for that.
Go and check him out. The Cade's brother episode was really, really good as well. I haven't listened to the Luke Cooper one, but I will go and listen to that one as well. Cade, thank you for coming on and chatting with the Pistons with me.
Thank you, man.
And that'll do it for me today. Don't forget to follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you are on YouTube, you thumb it up and you leave those comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.